Okay, this is the 4-2 review, graphing rational functions. So if we notice on the review, numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are all in the form g of x. Oops, equals a over x minus h plus k. Okay, so if they're in this form, your horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals k. That's your horizontal asymptote. And then your vertical is going to be x equals h. That is your vertical asymptote, right? When it's in the form g of x equals a, if we could draw better, a over x minus h plus k. Okay, so in the first one here, we have a -2, so our horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals -2, which means on the y-axis at -2, I'm going to draw a dashed line because that is my horizontal asymptote. Okay, my vertical is going to be 3. The easiest way to do this, or the way I do this, okay, vertical asymptote. I'm going to set the denominator equal to 0, so I'm going to do x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and I get x equals 3. So at 3, I'm going to draw a vertical asymptote. Okay, so I got my horizontal, I got my vertical. Okay. And then what I like to do is I like to just substitute in a point. I'm going to pick 0. Okay, so I'm going to pick a point 0. So I'm going to say f of 0 equals, okay, and then it's 2 over 0 minus 3. If I can go back, 0 minus 3 minus 2. Okay. And then I could just use a basic calculator because I'm not going to be able to use my graphing calculator on the quiz. Oops, calculator. Okay, so I know that 0 minus 3 is -3, and then minus 2. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do 2 divided by -3. Where's the negative on here? I do -3. Okay. And then I'm going to do -2. And that's going to give me -2.7 about. So f of 0 is going to be -2.7, approximately 2.7. I don't need to be exact. Okay, so when I plot this point, 0, -2.7, that's going to be right here. So what that tells me, right, is my graph is going to be in the bottom left and then in the upper right. It's just a sketch, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but it's going to look something like this because it needs to go through that point. Right, your graph is either going to be like this in the upper right, bottom left, or it's going to be in the upper left, bottom right. So it's going to be one of these two. Since the point goes there, it's going to look like the first one. All right, on number 2, our horizontal asymptote again is -2. My horizontal asymptote again is y equals -2. So I'm going to put a dash line again at -2. Okay, vertical asymptote. Set my denominator equal to 0. Vertical asymptote. So I'm going to do x equals 0. And it looks like there's nothing to solve. X equals 0 is my vertical asymptote. So at x equals 0, I'm going to put a dashed line. It's hard to do on yours because it's already a line there, but there's my vertical asymptote. Okay, and then I just need to figure, is it like the first one or is it like the second one? Okay, that's my only goal left. And to do that, I'm going to plug in a point. I like to use 0. I can't use 0 on this one though, because there is no x value at 0. So I'm going to use 1 on this one. I'm going to pick 1. But I literally could pick any point other than 0 because there is no x value of 0. So let's do f of 1. And that's going to give me negative 3 over 1 minus 2. I don't even need to use a calculator on this one because this is going to give me negative 3 minus 2, which is negative 5. So I have the point 1, negative 5, which is right here, which means it's going to look like the second one down here. It's got to be the bottom right and the top left. So I go up to my asymptotes, but I don't cross them. Right? I get close, but I don't cross them. All right, let's look at 3 and 4. Okay, number 3, horizontal asymptote. This time it's positive 2. So my horizontal asymptote this time is going to be y equals positive 2. Okay, vertical. It's going to be x equals negative 1. If I want to figure that out, I can do x plus 1 equals 0. Minus 1 on both sides, I get x equals negative 1. There's my vertical asymptote. So let's put those in vertical at negative 1. Horizontal at 2. Okay, and again, I'm going to pick the point 0, and I'm just going to plug in the point 0. So f of 0 equals negative. We have 2 over 0 plus 1 plus 2. That's going to give me negative 2 over 1 plus 2, which gives me negative 2 plus 2, which gives me 0. So I have the point 0, 0, which means it's going to be the bottom right and the upper left, just like that. Okay, over here, horizontal asymptote is y equals 1. Vertical asymptote, we have to do x minus 2 equals 0, which means when I add 2 to both sides, my vertical asymptote is x equals 2. So vertical at x equals 2. Horizontal at y equals 1. Okay, we got to pick a point. Let's pick 0. Again, I think 0 is the easiest. So I'm going to do f of 0 equals 3 over 0 minus 2 plus 1. This gives me 3 over negative 2 plus 1, which gives me negative 1.5 plus 1, which is going to give me negative 0.5. So at 0, 0.5, negative 0.5, not positive, right? Negative 0.5 is going to be right here, which means it's going to be in the bottom left and the top right. Okay, and then this doesn't touch though, right? It goes down but doesn't touch. All right, and those are your basic ones, okay, in the form of GA over X minus H plus K. Okay, but when you look down at 5 through 8, we notice things change. You have an X on both the top and the bottom. Okay, so what we're doing here on these, right, is we are looking at the degrees of the numerator and the denominator. So if the degrees of the numerator is greater than the degrees of the denominator, then there's no horizontal asymptote. Okay. If the degrees of the numerator, just put D for degrees, numerator is greater than the degrees of the denominator, then your horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. And if the degrees of the numerator equals the degrees of the denominator, then you're looking at the leading coefficients. Okay. So on this one, this is a first degree polynomial. This is also a first degree polynomial. So we're going to look at the leading coefficients here, which is 3, and really there's a 1 out here. So our horizontal asymptote is going to be, or I should do that in red because I've been doing it in red. Okay, our horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 3 over 1, which is y equals 3, right? 3 over 1 is 3. Okay, vertical. We do the same thing we were doing before. We're going to set the denominator equal to 0. So x plus 1 equals 0. I'm going to minus 1 on both sides, and I get x equals -1. So I have a vertical at -1. And I have a horizontal at 3. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing. We got to pick a point. So again, I like to use 0. I'm going to use 0. That gives me 3 times 0 over 0 plus 1, which gives me 0 over 1, which is 0. So I have the point 0, 0, which means we're going to be right here and right here in the bottom right and upper left. All right, the next one. So again, they're both first degree, right? This is first degree, first degree, first degree. So we're going to look at the leading coefficients here, which is -2 and 1. So my horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals -2 over 1, which is just y equals -2. Okay, my vertical asymptote is going to be -2. If I want to formally solve that out, it's x plus 2 equals 0, minus 2 on both sides. We get x equals -2. So at -2, there you go. And then they're both -2, it looks like, right? So -2 and -2. Okay, and then you pick a point. I like 0. 0 is my favorite. It's the easiest to work with. So I'm going to do f of 0. So I get -2 times 0 minus 2 over 0 plus 2, which is going to give me -2, right? 0 minus 2. Maybe I should write that out. 0 minus 2 over 0 plus 2, which is going to give me -2 over 2, which is -1, which is right here. So when I graph this, it's going to come down through -1 and then look something like this. And it's going to look something like this. Okay, that's 6. All right, we're going to do the same thing for 7 and 8. All right, so they're both first degree. So our horizontal is going to be y equals -3. Right, -3 over 1, which is just going to be -3. And then my vertical asymptote is going to be x minus 2 equals 0. So when I add 2 on both sides, I get x equals 2. So let's see, we got 2. And then we got -3. Just like so. Okay, we're going to pick a point. I'm going to pick 0 because obviously 0 is the easiest one to plug in, right? So f of 0 -3 times 0 plus 9 over 0 minus 2. That's going to give me 9 over -2, which I'm just going to say is -4.5. Okay, so 0, -4.5 is down here, which means this is going to look something like this. All right, next one. Horizontal asymptote looks like it's going to be 1/4. Right? This is 1/4. Y equals 1/4. So that's maybe right here. Okay, my vertical then. I'm going to do 4x plus 8 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 8. I get 4x equals -8. And then I'm going to divide by 4. And I get x equals -2. So I get -2 here. And then again, just one more time, we're going to plug in a 0. So f of 0 is 0 minus 1 over 4 times 0 plus 8. That's going to give me -1/8. So it looks like it's down here. So when I draw in my asymptote, it's going to look something. Whoops, that's not a good one. It's going to look something like such. That's not a good one either, I don't think. Maybe that's better. All right, so that's 1 through 8. All right, the next 6 are identify the vertical and horizontal asymptotes, so you don't have to graph them. Okay, so again, if we look at our numerator and denominator here, this is a 0 degree polynomial, 0 degrees. Okay, and the bottom here is a 2nd degree. Right, so the denominator, the degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator. Right, therefore, the horizontal asymptote is y equals 0, right? Because the degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator. Right, vertical asymptote. We're going to do x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0, right? We're going to set the denominator equal to 0. To solve this, we need a factor, so I need to use the x method. I need two numbers that multiply to -6 and add to +1. That's going to be +3 and -2. So when I get my factors here, it's going to be x plus 3 and x minus 2. And then we set each of those factors equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. And then we solve those equations. -3, that's going to give me x equals -3. There's one vertical asymptote, and then +2. I get x equals 2. There's my second vertical asymptote. Okay, so those are my vertical. All right, horizontal, we're going to look at the degrees again, right? So this is first degree. And this is also first degree. So the degree of the denominator, the degree of the numerator equals the degree of the denominator. Therefore, we're looking at the ratios. So this is -1 over +1. So y is going to equal -1. -1 over +1 is going to give us -1. That's my horizontal asymptote. Okay, vertical, we're going to set the denominator equal to 0. So my vertical is simply x equals 0. Pretty straightforward there. Okay. Let's look at number 11 here. This is a first degree polynomial, and the bottom is a third degree polynomial. So we know the degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator. Therefore, my horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 0. Right, just like it was for number 9. The degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator, your horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 0, because as x gets to a larger and larger positive number or a larger and larger negative number, since it's larger on the bottom, it's going to end up going towards 0, because this gets larger and larger at a faster rate than does 2x. All right, vertical. We have to set the denominator equal to 0. So x to the third minus 2x squared minus 3x equals 0. Okay, I'm going to factor out an x. Then I have x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to use the x method here. So I need two numbers that multiply to -3, add to -2. That's going to be -3 and +1. So I have x, and then my two factors for here will be x minus 3 and x plus 1. So if I solve all of these, I have x equals 0. I have x minus 3 equals 0. And x plus 1 equals 0, which will give me x equals 0, x equals 3, and then x equals -1. So I have 3 vertical asymptotes. Okay. In reality, you'll be able to cancel out one of these x's. So this is really a whole. We don't need to much worry about that. And then you would just have vertical asymptotes at 3 and -1, but that's fine. All right, number 12. Yeah, number 12 is going to have holes. That's fine. Let's just follow our process. We can do our horizontal. Okay, so this is a third degree. And this is a second degree. Okay, so the degree of the numerator is greater than the degree of the denominator. So there is no horizontal asymptote, right? No horizontal asymptote, because the degree of the numerator is larger. Okay, for the denominator, okay, we have 3x squared minus 12. We can set that equal to 0. We add 12 to both sides. We get 3x squared equals 12. We're going to divide by 3, divide by 3. We get x squared equals 4. Then you take the square root of this, and we get x equals +2. And x equals -2. Okay, which is actually going to be pretty good. All right, the last ones here, let's clear this and head down to 13. So this is a second degree. Just let me stay consistent with my colors. This is second degree. The denominator is also second degree, right? The x squared, x squared. So we're looking at the ratios, which is -2/1. So my horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals -2/1, which is just -2. And then my vertical is going to be, let's see, we got to set x squared minus 9 equal to 0. I'm going to add 9 to both sides. I get x squared equals 9. I take the square root of both sides, and I get x equals 3, and x equals -3. Okay, over here, this is third degree. This is second degree, right? X squared, x to the third. So there is no horizontal asymptote, right? No horizontal because the degree of the numerator is larger than the degree of the denominator, right? The degree numerator larger than the degree of the denominator. Okay. Vertical. So now let's set our denominator equal to 0. So 4x squared minus 8x minus 12 equals 0. I'm going to pull out a 4, and I get x squared minus 2x minus 6. I'm sorry, minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. That way I now just have x squared minus 2x minus 3. And now I'm going to factor. Okay, so I need two numbers that multiply to -3, add to -2. It's going to be -3 and +1. So I'm going to do x minus 3 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. Add 3, I get x equals 3. Minus 1, x equals -1. All right. Okay. Now 15 and 16 are your level 4 questions. First thing you want to do is what we just did, vertical and horizontal. Okay, so let's do horizontal. Is going to be y equals 0, right? The degree of the numerator right? This is 0 degrees, and this is second degree. So numerator less than the denominator. Okay, vertical. Okay, 3x squared minus 12. We're going to set that equal to 0. We're going to add 12 to both sides. We get 3x squared equals 12. We're going to divide both sides by 3. We get x squared equals 4. Take the square root of both sides. We get x equals +2. Sorry, x equals +2. And x equals -2, plus or minus 2. So I'm going to put vertical at 2 and -2. Okay, and I'm going to put a horizontal at 0. It's going to look like this. Okay. So I need to figure out what this graph looks like. Okay, it could look like a lot of different things here. It could look like this and this. You could have a parabola in here, right? You could have it look like this, right? So we need to figure out what this is going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to do 1 point. I'm going to do 3. All right, because it's to the right of our vertical asymptote here. And I'm also going to do -3 because it's to the left. So I'm going to do f equals 3 and f equals -3. Okay, so I'm going to do 1 divided by 3 times 3 squared minus 12. Okay, so if I need help with my calculator, that's going to be 3 times 3 squared minus 12 is 15. Okay, so it's 1 over 15, which equals approximately 1 divided by 15, 0.0. So I'm just going to say 0.1. Okay, 0.1. So when I go back to my graph, 3, 0.1 is right here, which means that this part is going to be on the upper right, just like this. Okay. All right, now I'm going to pick over point over here. I'm going to do -3. It's got to be the left of this vertical asymptote, so -3. So it's 1 over 3 times -3 squared minus 12. Okay, that's going to give me the same thing, the exact same answer. It's going to give me 1 over 15, which is approximately 0.1, which is right here, which means I am still above that axis. Okay, not the greatest line drawn, but looks pretty good there. Okay, something like that. All right, the tricky part in the middle here, I need at least 3 points to figure out if it's going to be a parabola or if it's going to come up. Right, I'm not really sure, so I need to use, let's say, 3 points. I'm going to use -1, 0, and 1. So I'm going to find f of -1. I'm going to find f of 0. And I'm going to find f of 1. Okay. So f of -1, that's going to be 1 over 3 times -1 squared minus 12. Okay, and then we'll have 1 over 3 times 0 squared minus 12. And then we're going to have f of 1 over 3 times 1 squared minus 12. Okay. Basically, I know this is going to give me -1/9. You can use your calculator. Again, it's fine. This is going to give me -1/9. And this is going to give me, that's a 0, -1/12. Okay. So what this is telling me, if I get decimals, is that these are all below. All 3 of these are below, which means it's going to be a parabola. It's going to go down somewhat like such. Okay, and again, you can get decimals here. You can just put it in, 1 over 9, 0.11, right? So this is -0.11. This is -0.11. Then you can do 1 over 12, 0.08, 0.08. Something like that. Okay. All right, let's do the next one here. So let's start with horizontal. We're going to have y equals 1, right? Because second degree. So my leading coefficients here are 1 and 1. So 1 divided by 1 is going to be 1. Okay, and then vertical, I need to set the denominator equal to 0. So for my vertical, I need to do x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 0. So I need to use the x method. I need 2 numbers that multiply with -3, add to +2. That's +2, 3, and -1. Okay, so I got x plus 3, x minus 1, right? X plus 3 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. Subtract 3 on both sides. I got x equals -3. Add 1 to both sides. I got x equals 1. Wonderful. So I have vertical at -3 and +1. And I have horizontal at +1. Okay, now we just got to pick points. So I'm going to pick one to the right of this vertical asymptote, which is 2. So I'm going to find f of 2. Okay. And I'm also going to find one to the left, which is -4. So I'm also going to find f of -4. Okay. So this is, let's see, 2 squared plus 5 times 2 plus 4 over 2 squared plus 2 times 2 minus 3. Okay, let's see. That's going to be 4 plus 10. That's going to be 18 over 2 squared is 4 plus 4 is 8 over 5, which is going to give me 3.6 about, or exactly 3.6 to be honest. Okay, so 2 comma 3.6 is going to be right here. So on this side, we're going to be above the horizontal asymptote. Okay, and I'm going to check again on the left side by using -4. So again, I'm going to have -4 squared plus 5 times -4 plus 4 over -4 squared plus 2 times -4 minus 3. So that's going to give me 16. This is going to give me 0 over, doesn't matter, right? 16 minus 8 minus 3 is going to be 5, which is just 0. 0 over 5 is 0. So it looks like this one's going to be on the bottom, like this. Okay, and then to figure the middle out, we're going to need a couple points. I'm going to do -2, -1, and 0. So I'm going to need f of -2. I'm going to need f of -1. And I'm going to need f of 0. Let's do 0 first. That's the easiest. Okay, that's going to be 0 plus 0 plus 4 over 0 plus 0 minus 3. That's going to give me -1.3. Okay, so it's 0, -1.3 is going to be right here. All right, -1. Let's see, we got -1 squared plus 5 minus times -1 plus 4 all over -1 squared plus 2 times -1 minus 3. That's going to give me 1 minus 5 plus that's going to be 0 over 1 what's that, a minus 3 at the end? 1 minus 2, that's -5, 1 minus -4, but that doesn't matter, it's going to be 0. Okay, so if this next one's down here, it's going to be a parabola. If not, it's going to go up. Let's see. So -2 squared is 4. 5 times -2 is -10 plus 4. Okay, -2 squared is 4. 2 times -2 minus 4 minus 3. That means we're going to have -2 over -3, which is going to be 2 over 3. So at -2, 2/3, that's going to be up here. So it looks like we're going to have a one that just keeps going up. Okay, and that is our review.